Hello!
Hi!
And welcome to our assignment number 4 for big data analysis.
Number 2. I'm Kristen.
My name is Lena.
My name is Kelly.
And I'm Antonia. And together we are group number 1 from class 2A.
Enjoy the video.
Recently we got an email from you with data gathered by the University of Amsterdam, who interviewed 736 Americans about patriotism. And first of all, they were asked to just define patriotism, and then further data about them was gathered. For example, how patriotic they would say they are themselves, how proud they are to be American, how important it is for them to be American, and they could rate these questions sometimes from 0 to 10 or from 0 to 5, depending on how accurate they were. Also, the participants' demographics were gathered. For example, which ethnicity they are, what religion they believe in, what their gender is, how high their income is, how old they are, and which TV channels they watch most. So looking at this data and clearing it up for us a little bit, we came up with a research question, which was, or is, to what extent do the political orientation, the age, and the consumption of different TV channels influence American patriotism? In order to answer this research question, we came up with 3 hypotheses.
So our first hypothesis is that conservative voters are more patriotic than liberal ones.
Hypothesis number 2 is younger voters are less patriotic than older voters.
So, hypothesis number 3 is patriotism is influenced by the news channels Americans prefer to watch.
Now, looking at the requirements for this assignment that you sent us, we are first of all going to talk about the literature review that we did. We looked into academic as well as professional articles. We also then are continuing on to the Twitter sentiment analysis that we conducted. And in the end, we're going to check if the data from the Amsterdam University that you sent to us via Excel actually agrees with what we found out. After we found our research question and our hypothesis, we started doing some desk research, and we looked into different articles. For example, from Bloomberg, an article that states, had only millennials voted, Clinton would have won in a landslide. Also looking into the PEW Research Center website that stated, Republican voters are becoming more diverse, better educated, and less religious at a slower rate than the country generally. And thirdly, looking into Reuters, which is a German news agency, that stated, in general, millennials tend to vote more for Democratic Party candidates than Republicans. We also found 2 academic articles, one from the Tufts University, Civic Youth, which stated that 55% of young people voted for Hillary Clinton, while 37% supported Donald Trump. And another academic article from Harvard, heavy there. Among likely voters, Clinton has 61% of young voters and Trump 25%, with 14% of likely young voters unsure. We think that with the recent elections in the US, of course, a lot of the online articles were very specific and politically, especially now that the Republicans and Democrats did such a close race this year. So we wanted to investigate further on that. The Tufts University, in their academic article, published this graphic which shows the Democratic and Republican political opinion depending on age. And now looking at 2016, the relevant year to us right now, it's quite interesting that people below the age of 30 are more democratic with 55%, versus older generations, 45 plus, are above 50%. Both of them are 53% Republican. So now looking at the data from the Amsterdam University later on, it's going to be interesting to see if these numbers are the same and if it somehow links to patriotism. The graphic we found in the Harvard academic article, on the other hand, shows that people below the age of 24, 18 to 24-year-olds, here in the right section of the graphic, are by 27% more likely to vote for the Republican candidate in the 2016 elections, and people above the age of 25 to 29 are even by 28% more likely to vote for the Republicans. So these studies seem to be a bit contradicting, so we are now even more curious to find out what the data from the Amsterdam University is going to tell us about that later.
So, looking at our Twitter sentiment analysis, we typed in a few terms in order to see what the Twitter users said about their political views. So the first terms we typed into the engine were Proud American Democrat, and what we found is that there were positive and a few negative tweets. So you can see here on the heat map that there are a few tense and nervous tweets about this topic and quite a few positive ones. Those are the green ones. Secondly, we typed in Proud American Republican, and as you can see now, there are quite a few or only positive tweets about this topic, and there are less frequent than the ones for the Democrat tweets. So this shows that there are not strong negative opinions about the patriotism with the Republicans.
Moving on to the data you provided for us from the Amsterdam University, we created 3 pivot tables. The first pivot table we titled, How Proud Are the Participants to be American with Different Political Views? So we thought this was really interesting because we see here that the more conservative the participants are, the prouder they are to be American. If you look at the very first one, conservative, and also the second one, extremely conservative, both rated their proudness to be American with a 9, which is very high on a scale from 1 to 10. And looking now at the liberal or extremely liberal participants of the study, they seem to be less proud to be American. Still proud, still over 5, but just not as proud as their conservative counterparts, with only getting a 6 and a 7 on their proudness scale. The second pivot table you can now see on your screen takes the different age groups in consideration when looking at how proud someone or one of the participants is to be American. And we found out that the older the participants were, the prouder they were to be American, which would agree with the literature analysis that we showed you earlier. So when the Americans were 18 to 29, they were only up to 7 proud on a scale from 1 to 10, and they were actually the proudest to be American between 45 and 59, with an average of 9 points of proudness. And then maybe the 60-plus-year-olds didn't really care anymore. No, just kidding. with an 8, so a little bit less, but still higher than the younger generation. And now our third pivot table: how proud are the participants that watch certain news channels to be American? Especially looking at the Trump election, we heard and read in the media a lot that Fox News supported Trump, supported Republicans, supported being more conservative. And looking at the data from the Amsterdam University, there seems to be a correlation here, because people who watch Fox News throughout all age groups seem to be very proud to be American, with a 9 for the 18 to 29-year-olds, a 9 for 33 to 45-year-olds, even a 10 for 45 to 59-year-olds, and another 9 for the 60-plus-year-olds. So Fox News watchers are proud to be American. And looking at, for example, foreign news, there seems to be only a 6 at proudness for 18 to 29-year-olds, and a 6, another 6, and another 8 for 60-plus-year-olds. Wow, that rose quickly. Yeah, the middle-aged people who watch foreign news seem to be a little less proud to be American, maybe because they know what's going on in the outside world. And all of them are definitely less proud to be American than the Fox News watchers in this data analysis. Concluding and looking back at the literature we read, the sentiment analysis we did, and the data we sorted out from the Amsterdam University, we are now coming back to our research question. To what extent do the political orientation, the age, and the consumption of different TV channels influence American patriotism? And we are happy to be able to confirm our first hypothesis with the data, especially from the Amsterdam University. Conservative voters are more patriotic than liberal voters. You can clearly see that in the pivot table number 1, that the conservative or people who consider themselves to be conservative get a lot higher proudness with a 9 than people who consider themselves liberal, only getting a 6 in the proudness scale. The second hypothesis, younger voters are less patriotic than older voters, gets confirmed by several sources. First of all, our assumption that not an assumption, we are professionals here, so it is a hypothesis, educated guessing, as we learned. We saw that the more conservative a participant considered themselves, the more patriotic they were. So applying that to our second hypothesis and saying younger voters are less patriotic than older voters gets also confirmed by the study from the Tufts University, where we see that the younger people from 18 to 29 voted rather liberal, democratic, with 60% in 2012 and 55% in 2016. And now going to the data from the Amsterdam University that shows that they are also less proud to be American because they are more liberal. And the older generations, for example, 30 to 44-year-olds, being only 50% Democratic and 42% Republican, and then even older people, 45 to 64, being 53% Republican, they are most likely prouder to be American than their younger counterparts. And now looking at the second pivot table that we made up. No, we didn't make it up. We got it from the data, but, well, you know what I mean. You can clearly see that the younger people, 18 to 29, rated themselves with a 7 in proudness, while the 45 to 59-year-olds, who are also voting in favor of the Republicans, as I just explained, rating themselves with a 9 in proudness. So the second hypothesis, that younger voters are less patriotic than older voters, we consider also as confirmed. Finally, we're talking about hypothesis number 3. Patriotism is influenced by the news channels the Americans prefer to watch. Now, we thought this is interesting because in the articles we read, and especially the ones in Reuters we quoted earlier, let's face it, that's where younger voters are. They're on social media. So the data we got from the University of Amsterdam did actually not agree with this, because there it seemed that every age group was watching TV quite a lot. But we confirmed the hypothesis with the data from Amsterdam, because we can see, as we showed earlier, that, for example, Fox News seems to be quite conservative, and people who watch it are very proud, with a 9 and a 10 in their proudness votes, and that people who watch different news channels, for example foreign news, are less proud, with only a 6, another 6, another 6, and then only for the 60-plus-year-old an 8 in proudness to be American. So patriotism is related, or stands in correlation with the news channels that the participants prefer to watch.
So in order to wrap it all up, we just wanted to say that it's important to look at different data collecting methods in order to grasp the opinion of the whole, because there's only a sample from each method and it doesn't represent the opinion of everybody.
Finally, we answer our research question. To what extent do the political orientation, the age, and the consumption of different TV channels influence American patriotism?
Conservative voters are more patriotic than liberal voters.
Young voters are less patriotic than older voters.
And patriotism is influenced by news channels the Americans prefer to watch.
Happy holidays!
Enjoy!
Thank you so much for listening today.
See you next year!
Bye, Nickers.
Bye!